Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Lens with Advanced Design. Our, our guest designer today is Jessica Choi, and a little bit about Jessica is she's a multidisciplinary designer from Detroit, Michigan, where she attended CCS, the College of Creative Studies. She's been an industrial designer in the Bay Area since 2015, where she began at Matter Studios. Since she began her career, she has worked with companies such as Samsung, Epson, Bose, and Auris, and numerous of Bay Area startups. She continues to reside in San Francisco, where she is now an industrial designer at Google on the Immersive Wearables Team on the hardware organization. And outside of work, she enjoys creating through different mediums to produce offbeat experiments in photography, drawing, apparel, prints, objects, and sounds. Today, our topic is diversity in design, which mimics our topic from last Sunday, diversity in design. But today's topic is a little different in the sense that we're going to be talking about a different type of diversity, and that is of gender. So we're really happy to have Jessica here on Lens, and I'm going to turn things over to her now. And I encourage the audience, for those who are tuning in, please start asking questions in the Q&A, and I will do my best to integrate your questions into our conversation with Jessica. So Jessica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with everybody. So let's get started because my presentation is sort of long. Oh. Okay. Can you guys see my screen, Hector?
Yep, everything looks good.
Beautiful. So yeah, thank you for the intro. Today I'd love to talk about diversity in design, or really the lack thereof, and more so around the culture in the team than design itself. So I want to also preface before going into this presentation that this is not in any way bashing any companies. This is not to talk about the products that they design or talk badly about products that they design. It is just clearly to start a conversation around how to build diversity within teams, how to create awareness about this, how to potentially have conversations with your organization about this. It's not in any way, this is bad design, this is good design. It's nothing like that. And then also, I really want to talk about the representation of women in design. And I'll touch a little bit on, people of color and just diversity in general, but I think I probably have the most expertise or room to talk about women in design because I am a woman. I'm also an Asian woman in design. So it all started a few days ago when I went on this rant on Instagram talking about just seeing the lack of female representation in industrial design and really seeing that within the products that are coming out these days. And I pulled up this image on the left here, which are the, of course, madmen of mid-century design. And then on the right here, which are the madmen of Silicon Valley design. And I know like some of these guys personally, and they're wonderful people and amazing designers, but unfortunately, this is very common in the Bay Area and really everywhere in the world where design firms exclusively almost only hire male. I don't know if they do it purposely. Some companies do, and they're really proud of this bro culture, but it happens. So something I hear a lot when I ever bring this up is we have plenty of women on the design team. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Look at Fuse, look at, all these other companies that have women. But my question always is, are they industrial designers? A lot of times I hear people that work in these design firms saying, I've worked on a team where we've interviewed two very qualified women industrial designers, but the comment was, we don't know if they're going to fit well into our culture, is what they call it. And I've been in that situation before where we are looking at candidates that are very qualified and, maybe their aesthetic is not as adhered or a little bit more on the masculine side of what we're looking for, or they just don't know how to like vibe with the team, which by the way would be like 10 guys and me. And we end up passing them up. And this is not just on one company, I hear this a lot. To the point where when we go to design dodgeball, which is a festivity of every year, and all the Bay Area tech design startups, firms come together, we have a rule where each team has to have at least one woman playing on the team in order to qualify. And I'm sure women don't really feel like playing dodgeball. I don't know. I usually feel that way too. But it's that rule has started because we don't really have that many female working on these teams in the first place. And also, why am I qualified to talk about this? Well, I've been working in the Bay Area for the last 5 or so years. I've worked in 3 different design firms, one in the Midwest, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, which here, and now in a corporation, which is Google. And so I feel like I've kind of had very different experiences throughout the different parts of the US. And I'm also part of Women in Design SF program, which is a collective of women that come together and share our experiences. And it's really just like this really great safe space for us to talk about our experiences and also mentor other women in design. I've also mentored students, especially girls that are pursuing design. So, this is something that I haven't just thought about out of the blue. It's something I've experienced, something I'm passionate about, something I've been actively participating in. And then, like I mentioned, I've worked in firms where it's been predominantly men and me. So this conversation really started when I saw the PS5 release on Hypebeast. And honestly, I was shocked. There are a lot of conversations out there on just like the design. People are calling it ugly, but I saw something a little bit more than that. As soon as I saw this, I was like, oh my God, this is like the Tesla all over again. Like, why is this coming back? What is this aesthetic, this like hyper aggro masculine aesthetic that's coming back? It almost represents this kind of toxic masculinity that's manifesting itself in physical form. And I can't help but notice that it's a trend. You can see it in like ergonomic mouse designs or keyboards. And again, like I understand that there are products that need to be designed in this sort of over-designed fashion because of the ergonomics that it needs to have function for. But we've seen this in razor designs and toothbrush designs, and now we're seeing this new wave of redesigning, right, where we're realizing, hey, like razors and toothbrushes and potentially mice don't have to be designed to look like they're about to fix a rocket ship. Like it actually is only being used for a couple of minutes at a time. Let's rethink this design. And then of course, looking at gameware, controllers, consoles, just some representations of not as aggro masculine design, but still like has a hint of masculinity in blogs I found on Les Manouches. And then these products here. And again, it's not super hyper like aggro masculine like the Tesla truck or the PS5, but you can really tell from these products that it's been worked heavily by a team of men, or it's definitely passed through higher ups who are men. And I can say that because I know the teams or the people that have worked on this, and that is the case. And then one of my favorite examples, and I love the Dyson. I own a Dyson, and it is probably one of my favorite things I own. But it's really interesting that they designed this vacuum product targeted towards women who like love to clean. And I'll show you those images coming up here, and place it in like a very femininely designed apartment. And have this crazy aggro looking vacuum cleaner in the middle of it and think that this is okay. And they're famously known for having a very male dominated team and underrepresented amount of women. And again, all their ad images are like women vacuuming, showing their passion for cleaning. And, it's always in these beautifully decorated homes, which are probably decorated by the female figure of the home. And yet the vacuum cleaner feels so out of place. And then also just in terms of usability of it, I've owned this vacuum cleaner before and it is really freaking heavy. I can barely vacuum it without feeling like I'm gonna break something because it's so heavy and monstrous. And this woman carrying it up the stairs is a lie. It is not that easy to carry it up the stairs. So it's just things like this that they don't think about when they're designing, because potentially the lack of diversity within the team, the lack of women, just the lack of experiences that they're collecting when they're actually thinking about ways to design this. But yet, still, the comments that I get when I posted about kind of the hyper masculine design that I've been seeing is, or the 80s are coming back strong. But that's the problem, right? In the 80s, there were barely any women industrial designers, even more than now, that drove the aesthetic to be hyper masculine at the time. So, like, again, like this is a chain effect. We're seeing this as a deeper rooted issue. When I type in industrial design history, these are the photos that come up. White men in studios. And then again, I just typed into the bar famous industrial designers, and the first row of designers I get are just all men: Philip Stark, Johnny Ive, Dieter Rams, Mark Newson, Kareem Rashid, James Dyson, Charles Eames, Ray Eames, woman, Tom Dixon, Naoto, Marcel, Raymond Lowy, and I just clicked the next button. Hopefully, I was hoping that it would just refresh with some female designers. I get a few here. No, I don't. It's in the next row. But again, just a whole row of men designers, another whole row. I think I see maybe 2 or 3 on this page. And this is just typing in famous industrial designers. And then I realized, looking back in my education, I don't remember learning about a single female industrial designer. I've only learned about Ray Eames, and I think it's pretty common. It was really afterwards that I've had to do my research to find female industrial designers. So let me just cover some stats and some facts and back it with some proof, because I can talk about this all I want, but until people actually see the numbers, I feel like people won't believe me. Just 1 in 5 designers in the UK are women, according to new research by the Design Museum in London. I couldn't really find anything on America specifically, but I mean, if this is UK and UK has a very strong industrial design presence, then it's probably even worse in the US. The survey found that women make up just 22% of the design workforce, even though 7 out of 10 students taking design are women. The report found the UK's design workforce is 78% male, 22% female. When looking at specific sectors, only 5% of design workers in product and industrial design are women, while 83% of workers in architecture and built environment are male. To take this a step further, research suggests possible pay disparities between men and women across the design economy. Take, for example, the clothing sector workforce, 68% of which are female, the lowest median gross weekly salary within the design economy at $313 per week. Conversely, the product and industrial design sector has one of the highest weekly salaries at $893 per week, but the lowest proportion of female workers at just 5%. Male designers seem to be concentrated in the highest paying sectors. 83% of the total male design workforce earns an average of $760 per week or more, which is above the national average. And then I did a little bit of digging around female leadership. I couldn't really find one specifically industrial design, but taking from a sister discipline, which is graphic designers, which have a very 50-50 split there. Actually, 53% of all graphic designers are women, but only 11% of creative directors are women. That's crazy, and I can't even imagine what that number is translated into industrial design. It's perfectly possible that a female graphic designer might never work under a female creative director. In fact, 70% of young female creatives say they have never worked under a female creative director. And being in Women in Design program and mentoring younger women designers, something that I hear so often is, I feel like I'm losing hope, or I just feel like I don't have anyone to talk to, or I feel like they don't get me, or I feel like they don't understand the issues that I'm facing at work, because I don't work with many females and I definitely don't work under any females. So this really great quote from Yvonne Lin from Smart Design. She says, "I think it's a product design thing." She said she's not surprised at the low numbers of women. She thinks something happens after female designers leave school, where she says she's noticed the number of women being much higher, maybe even 50%. Somewhere between design school and working in the industry, they get lost. Just like what I mentioned, they just don't have the guidance and the leadership from other women. She says they go into things like research because women are interested in people, not just this product, this icon, but how they use it, live with it, the whole experience. I've noticed that as well. A lot of times when you work in these Bay Area firms, it's about styling and, with the bro culture and everything, they're like, oh, that's really hot, that's sick, that's dope, like make that surface look like this, that's really sexy. And it's like this culture that they talk, the way that they talk about the design, it's just about stylizing, it's about making it look really hot, and it's not, it doesn't come from a place that women as designers like actually care about designing, right? It's like it's a deeper process, and we care about the way that people are going to use this product, the environments that it's going to live in, who's going to buy it. Like those things matter to us. And I'm not saying this is just women. I know that there are male designers out there that are more attuned to this, but I've definitely noticed this being a commonality. You'll notice in industrial design courses, like she's mentioned previously before, there's a 50-50 split of men and women. And I hear this all the time. When I had this Instagram rant, I've had colleagues message me being like, hey, I'm teaching a class this year. You should be really excited. There's actually more women than men in my class. But I always answer back, I understand that. But for some reason, after school, in the real world, the fall off begins to happen. The statistics actually show around 25% women working in the industry compared to men. And actually, if you ask other designers, it's really about 10 to 15%. And I think, and we'll have a conversation about this too, and I really think it's because when you're young in your career and you kind of go into these new environments where it's predominantly male, women tend to feel really insecure, or just kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Just I don't know, kind of like intimidated, I guess. If you're the only female, you do have differences. I think you have a lot of commonalities, but there are some differences in the way that you work, the way that you think, your preferences, the way that you design, and it's just really easy to feel intimidated in those environments. And so they kind of, from my conversations with other women in design who have converted into UI or UX or research, it's always that they just kind of, they were pushed out from industrial design completely. Let's take a step back. So like I mentioned before, it's not just the lack of women in design, it's, people of color, it's diversity as a whole. Only 3% of the design industry is African American, which AGA and Google's design census found in 2016. White people, on the other hand, make up 73% of the industry. So AGA is this really awesome graphic design organization, and then Google's design census, I think, covers more like the vague design industry, but I think as a whole it's only 3% of the design industry is African American, is what they found. And in that survey, they showed it showed that 55% of those surveyed were male and 44% were female. In terms of ethnicity, 73% of those surveyed were white, 7% were Hispanic, 8% were Asian, and 3% were African American. These are better numbers than previously before, but we still have a long way to go to make that better. The person that was showing this survey mentioned that being on par with the US Census should be the goal for the design industry, one that will only be reached if design leaders commit to hiring for diversity, looking for and exposing the work of those outside of their design circles and studios, and checking their unconscious biases. And I 100% agree with that. I think as I've been helping companies before, I'm helping Google now, like look for other designers for internships, for hire, and I find myself all the time just only looking at portfolios of, the white population or just men. And I have to kind of check my biases there and be like, okay, am I am I creating a pool that's fair enough? And it really does come down to us who have been working in the field and have the position of hiring potential new employees. Design companies in Silicon Valley alone report only single-digit percentages of American employees of color. Design conferences and smaller events promise to do better every year after unveiling speaker panels with majority white speakers. So this image here, I have to cover their faces, but they're majority white. I think they're all white actually, and they're all men. And between magazines, podcasts, and other media, the field of design can look like it's only created for and by a certain group of people. I see this all the time on design blogs and Instagram posts and these places that are representing the cool Bay Area hip design firms. It's always these really like cheesy staged photos of like somewhat diverse teams, but it's not that representative. And a lot of times they like kind of look the same, and it's just kind of scary almost. And this picture here, they like kind of grayed it out, but you can see the workers in there. It's predominantly male, it's predominantly white, and it's really funny because in that page, it has the word diverse on top of it, and it just seems so backwards or wrong. Again, those kind of cheesy, corny, like, we're all here together, working together, and we're diverse images that they post online. I know there are firms out there that are probably this diverse. Kudos to them, they have it figured out. But I've definitely worked in a firm, and I'm not going to confirm or deny one of these images is of that firm, but we had to stage a shoot where it showed us in action of us sketching and model making, and I think I was the only girl industrial designer on the team. I think we might have had another female intern at the time, but she left shortly after. And they asked like PMs and office managers who are women or UI UX designers to come in and act like they're sketching so that they can photograph our process, because they wanted it to look more diverse. And that's so crazy to me. If like we were doing that, I'm sure there are other places that are doing that as well. And also, just because these cool, like, hip Bay Area, like, smart design idea who are very diverse are showing off their diverse offices is not representative of the entire, like, design industry. That's probably only, like, 10% of the industry, really. I think we're lucky kind of in being in a progressive area. But in the rest of the U.S., I don't know about the world, but the U.S., where I've worked in the Midwest, the East Coast, these are pulled from companies in those areas. This is kind of what the workplace looks like. And they're even holding workshops for kids to get into industrial design, but a lot of times they're young white boys. So let's go back to this kind of trend of like aggro, hyper masculine language showing up in these products, and comments that I know I'll get are, "Hey Jess, but these are like targeted towards men, these types of products." But that is where I don't think we're quite correct either. Women use mice. We use mice, and ergonomic mice. There are a lot more women in the workforce now, and we use mice and computer equipment. We use a lot of computer equipment, even not designers. There are women who are working at their computers all the time. Game systems, consoles. I have a whole section here that talks about numbers on the growing number of female in gaming and electronics and tech and trucks. My father works in the automotive industry, and I found this online as well, and he talks about it all the time. 62% of all new cars sold in the US are bought by women, according to research from cars.com, which also found that women influence more than 85% of all car purchases. And even with falling sales of trucks these days, truck sales are 20% women. So anytime someone tells me, "Oh, Jess, but the Tesla truck, you don't like it because it's not targeted towards women," that is not true. That's not true at all. The tech industry has long been dominated by men, even at CES, but women are really the powerhouse in the household, driving purchase decisions, says Jill Braff. Women are highly engaged with the latest and greatest gadgets and technology. Women bring this different perspective that might reflect who's actually using the product compared to who is buying it. So with that whole study that they did to kind of bring to CES to prove like, hey, actually, guys, like, look at these products. It's, we design under the influence that men are actually the ones buying our products, but our study says otherwise. 88% of women purchased any tech-related item in 2010 compared to 83% of men, according to the study. Women are also playing gaming consoles more than they were in previous years, especially on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, the study found. Women, 54%, are more interested in social gaming with multiplayers compared to 45% of men. In addition, females are 40% more likely playing games on Facebook. Women express more interest in tablets, 18%, laptops, 20%, and smartphones, 20%. Only 15% of men plan to buy a tablet, while 14% sought a laptop and 17% intended to buy a smartphone. The only category that really surpasses the female was the LCD TVs. When it comes to deciding which electronic devices to buy, about 32% of women compared to 26% of men said ease of use was important. Women bought an average of 4.7 consumer electronic products in 2010, compared to men, an average of 4.2 products. So what? Well, I think as a female industrial designer, it's really important to advocate for this and to see these trends going on in the design world, but also see the trends that are going on in the consumer world, right? And if we are designing around false assumptions, I think that's already the beginning of the problem there, around the target consumer. Number two, I think we have to do better as designers, as teams, as organizations, as design firms, to be aware of this problem and hire more diversity. Not only that, I think just to be aware and within your own team, and to make it your responsibility to see if there's anything going on. And I know like a lot of times design firms don't have HR because they can't afford it, but I think it's important if you are a manager or a new manager, a young manager trying to become a manager, but you're, overseeing people, it's so important to actually check in to see if they feel heard, if they feel represented, if, anything is going on with the culture or team dynamic that should be talked about, that should be addressed. Also, unless women write their own history, sometimes a lot of this documentation doesn't happen, says Nancy Perkins, who's been an industrial designer since 1974. Books and museum shows, like a recent one which profiled GM's damsel designers, which I've actually seen in Michigan, who worked for the automaker in the 50s and 60s, help expose different audiences to the discipline, including the all-important audience of young women. But in this age, women can't wait for someone else to organize these events or to curate the museum shows. Being visible means speaking at conferences and talking to students, but also finding other ways to show what it's like to be working as a woman in design every day. So if you're not a manager, if you're not working in a design firm and you're just simply a student, using social media to share the inner workings of daily studio life or just, school life is key. And can you imagine what delectable gems design pioneer Ray Eames would have delivered on Twitter? I thought that was pretty funny. She'd be pretty dope. Creating a rich narrative illustrated with videos, photos, blog posts, essays is something I don't see nearly enough from women in the field, and I'm guilty of that too. Their numbers may be small, but it's the responsibility of that 10% to tell at least 50% of the story. And that's the end of my presentation. Sorry I don't have a finale slide, but I think that perfectly wraps up kind of everything that I want to talk about. I think we just have to be more vocal about it. I know it's so hard going into the design industry to feel like you don't have a voice and that you can't speak up about these things because you're just trying to assimilate to this bro culture. You just want to fit in because you want to turn this apprenticeship or this internship into a job. I get it. I've been there. I've had to personally, change myself and talk a certain way, act a certain way, grow these certain preferences because I felt like I didn't fit into this culture and the only way to get hired was to fit into this culture. And that's a really toxic environment to be in, and that's what's scaring away women who are much stronger than I am to be like, this is crazy, this is not for me, I'm gonna go do something else that can use my skill sets, for my great skill sets, for something else. So I think this is something, that I'm really excited to talk to you guys about. So Hector, take it away.
All right, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, if you can just exit the screen share, I can start taking some of these questions. Yeah, so we have a very interesting question here that was asked by Kevin. His question was, what brands are good, quote unquote, women design according to you?
What brands are quote unquote good women design, like teams?
I think he's looking for what brands are good women design according to you. So maybe like brands that design. So you were saying you gave an example of the PlayStation 5, um, and the Tesla, and even toothbrushes and things like that. And it looks like it has that, very aggressive masculine, um, aesthetic. So maybe his question is there any object that does the opposite?
Mm. So this is really interesting because like it's not even just it takes a female designer to design something that's not hyper masculine, like I work on a team that's majority male. I mean, like Google's design team, there's a lot of females under Ivy and as well, and it's really awesome. But still within our like own little design teams, they're broken up. Like my team specifically is all guys and just me, and yet the work that we produce is very like gender neutral. If anything, it kind of skews feminine. And I don't think it has to be about just having women on the team to create gender neutral products. But also my team has a lot of Asian representation, and I think like culturally speaking, a lot of products from Asia have this more like feminine or like cute or like softer appeal to it, and I think that's what skews it. But I think like Google products are a good example. I think we do a pretty good job. And I admit like it does kind of skew a little bit more feminine. But again, like our whole design team is still predominantly male. So, I mean, it has nothing to do with the fact that we just have a lot of women on the team. It's still predominantly male, but we're creating these more like approachable products that look good in the home, right? Look good in these homes that women are usually creating for their families. Or for their homes. And I think like those millennial type brands, like Harry's, or I think it's called like Billy, or like those razor companies that are really looking at how to redesign a shaver. Great example. Even Harry's is a male targeted company, right? Brand, but the product itself still looks really beautiful, still looks very thought out, looks like something that can blend into anybody's home. It doesn't look like it's going to work on a rocket ship. Like that's a perfect example right there. I think Xbox actually, if we're talking about gaming, great example. And some people are like, it's just a box, but a box sometimes is the hardest thing to design correctly, right? Like it could look like a very boring box, but Xbox is beautiful. They've done a great job not being hyper masculine, not being super feminine, and kind of creating an object that looks beautiful in any home, right? That's not invasive. It's like not selfish design. I think a lot of times when it's like over stylized, over surfaced, like almost like a concept car, which is what the PS5 looks like, it's very selfish design. It was like an opportunity for them to just stylize and not even think about the user. Yeah, so those are some brands I would say. So I think Apple, great example. I mean, it is a little bit more colder and a little bit more masculine, but I think they still are very aware of the user, and it shows.
Very well said. I think comparing it to another, the competitor, which is Xbox, I think they're very aware of the environment and where this object lives. And it's really funny that people were, shitting on the Xbox or shitting on a competing product for not, being different or taking risks. And I think you really explained it quite well. That at the end of the day, like I myself, yeah, maybe I might buy the PlayStation 5, but I also don't want my living room to look like I'm in college with like LCD lights, lighting up my room, and it's just unnecessary because it's probably going to be hiding. I'm probably going to hide this PlayStation in my bookshelf or underneath my TV or whatever the case may be. Very strange times. Um, Here's a very good question. This is asked by Katrina. So, what is your advice that you would give a young female industrial designer entering the field, as far as maybe being aware of stuff or taking action, right? Being very active and hands-on with everything that you're saying.
I think I kind of picture this like, what would I tell myself as someone like beginning to go into this industry? And I wish, I was always aware that it was male dominated, just because also my class is male dominated, and that's not always the case. But just to have expectations that you know you will face adversity, like oh, you will face instances where you are in a meeting with 13 men. It might be a client or it might be your own team, and you're in the middle of the room, and you have to be loud in order to be heard because they will simply not listen to you. And unfortunately, I don't think they're doing it on purpose. Obviously it's 2020 and everyone's woke now, and so there's the Me Too movement, all that. So people are trying to be more aware, but it's just it's conditioned in men to just like almost drown us out. Or it might be just because we're like very soft spoken. And you just have to learn to be loud. You have to learn to be unapologetic. You have to learn to, be expressive about design just as much as you can be in the work that you do. Because this goes for any designer. You can have the best work ever, right? But if you can't talk about your design, if you can't present it, it won't be seen, it won't be heard, it won't be listened to. So it's just really being loud. But of course, respectful. I think also just knowing how to handle the situations. Like, for example, I hear this a lot with women I mentor is I would say an idea while we're brainstorming and nobody says anything. And then 20 minutes later, someone says the exact same idea who's a guy, and everyone's like, oh, that's a great idea. Like, why haven't we thought about that before? Happens all the time. So in those moments, instead of getting personally hurt by it, just note it, bring it up to somebody instead of letting it like bask inside of your brain and creating this toxic like energy towards design for you. Like bring it up to the team, and make sure you like solve this now, make sure people are aware of it now so that this doesn't happen moving forward. And then also you as a designer don't build up all this kind of negativity and then end up just like bouncing from industrial design as a whole later on, because you just built up so many of these different instances where it like really hurts you. So just these little things I think can really help you build a toolbox for adversity. And then also don't change yourself going into the design world. Like, just because you see products out there that look like the Tesla truck doesn't mean that it's good. Doesn't mean that it's cool, and doesn't mean that you should be doing it. If you think that's not good, don't think that you're not going to get hired because you're not doing what's put out there. And I think that goes for any designer, right? So bring your perspective to the table and show that. I see it too much where like all of a sudden, like because these products are coming out, people are designing like that, and it's like, no, that's not the thing to do. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Absolutely. This is really interesting question here that was asked by Anonymous. Do you think that you should be downplaying or highlighting being a woman in design? And their explanation is by downplaying it feels like they would get a more playing field. But by highlighting it, they feel like it's going to open more doors to you.
Mm-hmm. This is a really interesting question. So this is really tricky because also as soon as you talk about it too much, you become that person, right? And then you become like blacklisted or whatever happens. But I think there's a good mix. You just have to learn what that is. And I don't really think there is an equation to it. I don't think there's a right answer. I think you just have to be kind of self-aware. It's tricky because you don't want to make it this crutch that you have. Like, for example, when I first started off, I would get comments like, you know, you've only got hired because you're a girl and like we needed a girl, or like you only got this far because you're a woman and there's just more opportunities for you because, you know, everyone's trying to hire a woman right now. And you just don't want to become a product of that. Like you don't want that to be like your badge of honor that you're wearing. So I guess a little bit of like kind of not downplaying it. Don't call it downplaying, but just normalcy, just like acting like I'm just a designer. Normalcy is really important. But at the same time, I think it's good to not highlight like I'm a woman, so like I bring more to the table for you and you should hire me. Like it should never be like that, but it should be like, hey, I do offer different perspectives because of the obvious, and you know I think I have a lot to offer there. um, and then also use that power to bring awareness to your team and change into the industry, but never to just benefit you as an individual. And I think as long as your intentions are good, um, it will show, and therefore you won't be blacklisted or like anything negative will happen to you in that way.
Absolutely. Do you think that design will always be like gendered, or with the proper representation, will the gap between masculine and feminine design dissolve? That's a question asked by David.
Interesting. I think it's inevitable that you have gendered design, right? Because sometimes you just have products that are for men, and there are products that are specifically for women. But I think as we're progressing as a society, and roles are becoming like merged, right? You see more fathers, stay-at-home fathers. You see more women in the workforce. You see more gamers. You see more women playing sports. You see Boy Scouts are allowing girls, and there's a lot of like merging of roles, and, and I think it's inevitable that products will start to become gender neutral because of it. Previously, before it was so gender, you know, biased or categorized because it was very much like female, male, you know, historically. But I think just we'll have to change. We'll have to change that, and we'll have to change that as designers if we're really truly attuned to our users. But at the same time, I think it's inevitable that there are products that should be skewed one way or another.
And I think a lot of that starts with education, with when you're going through school and maybe your school doesn't have, or maybe it has one, women professor. I think I would encourage the male professors to come forward and really, um, you know, um, open up, the students to this type of, with this type of rhetoric and aesthetic, and really helping the student understand that, even though the field is heavily male dominated, how can the male professor really change that as well, right? How do we create these allies with male, educators? Because I think it is their responsibility as well to really change this mindset. It shouldn't all fall on the women designers to, lead this charge, and changing diversity. It should really definitely come from the counterpart. It should come from all of us, not just the women.
Absolutely. I think, yes. Thank you so much for touching on that. That's like you said it perfectly there. Perfect.
Yeah, there's a question here about women in academia. What role do you feel having female representation in academia as on the woman has on the women? Lack of women in ID, or in their personal experience, I feel like the number of women in academia teaching industrial design is even lower than, and it's pretty bad. And this is a question that was asked
Yeah.
anonymously.
Yep. 100%. I've never had a female industrial design teacher in my life. And um, I think I mean, like, we're already having a really hard time filling industrial design roles to begin with. So, of course, like, it's going to be super hard to find female teachers. But what was the question there? How can we fill that?
Um,
Or I missed the beginning part of it.
I think it's just a lack of women in ID. Um, the undergrad um, school that I went to, there was only one female industrial design professor, and and recently, I don't know, like the last couple of years, she was pushed out, and now she teaches in graphic design because she was also, not only was she the only women industrial design in our department in industrial design, but she also was the only one that had a PhD. The problem is that her male counterparts were getting paid. The cap, the pay gap was um, pretty huge, even though they didn't have PhDs, and she never got compensated for her having that PhD. So she fought the university for it, and it was a very awkward situation that she had to sue the school because she had the highest degree but wasn't getting paid, and then eventually they pushed her out, and I think she's teaching graphic design now.
Tale as old as time. I mean, it's a problem, and that's a clear example of why there are female industrial design teachers. I think is a lack of professors in general. Like I've heard from other schools that they're having a hard time finding professors, and I think a lot of designers don't want to teach, and I think that itself is problematic, because how are we supposed to get more designers out there without us teaching them the ways? But yeah, it's really unfortunate, and I think it also, like, maybe the fall off of women in design happens within school too. Later on in school, it might start off that it's 50-50 split between men and women in class, but as soon as you go through training with all these men, I'm sure that there's like kind of a disconnect that happens, and women start to kind of steer off to UI UX or graphic design, or something more craft oriented. I see it happen all the time.
Here's a question by Lauren. She wants to know if you have any tips for young female designers who are trying to have their own opinions heard, valued in their design team, but she gets intimidated when she does that.
This is so hard. It's trial and errors. I was in that same position. I would literally, if this just helps you to like feel better about the situation, I would literally shake before I would present. Like I remember like holding my hands under the table, and like the day before I knew that we'd have a brainstorm, I would literally cry because I was so terrified of like what's to come, and I literally physically got ill because of just my stage fright that I had in these kind of times where it was my turn to shine as like an intern or like a junior designer. And I think a lot of it unfortunately comes down to the people who are managing you. They should make sure you don't feel this way. They should make sure that you feel like you are being heard. And so just make sure you build a good relationship with them. Tell them if something's going wrong. I think it's super important to be vocal, because they can't do anything about it if you are not telling them what's going on. And if you're worried about them judging you or thinking you're not strong enough or firing you, then they are terrible managers. They should not be in that position in the first place. And if everyone's telling them that something's wrong and they're turning everyone away, eventually they're not going to have anyone working for them. And we are seeing that now in design firms. There are some firms that are having a really hard time hiring good designers because word gets out and they're like, you don't want to work for that company because they won't support you. So just be vocal, and in numbers it really makes a difference, and it shows. I think you just have to practice. You got to look in the mirror and just be like, I'm a badass designer, and I happen to be a female, and I can do this. And you just do it, and you have to be loud. Don't whisper your ideas. Don't talk like this. You have to, have the posture and everything. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but it works. Use your hands, because they have to stare at you if everything around you is moving. These are things I've developed on my own because it's worked. Draw big, print your ideas really big, put it on the board, and everyone will gravitate towards it. So it's like, if your work is good, it's really big, you're presenting it really well, you have the energy, you're showing the passion, you're vocal, those are the ways. And it just, after time, they start trusting you, they build respect for you, and then you won't be intimidated anymore.
Do you think that
Mhm.
Oh, if you want to go ahead and finish.
Go ahead. I'm sure it'll come up later.
Sometimes, I think sometimes when you are put in this specific situation, even as a minority, you sometimes ask, well, is this really about race or gender, or can I just like do my work and just ignore it and just focus on my work and presenting the best design that I can present, being the best
Mhm.
designer? Or do you feel guilty like maybe I should be vocal because I am a minority or of this gender? It's kind of like it's like you're trying to choose what fight to fight.
Right. So this is it's really funny because the ultimate goal here is you never should have to be like, I'm saying this because I'm a minority or I'm a female. I shouldn't have to be having this talk with you guys. Like my goal is for all of us to be able to just do the best design work that we can and put it out there. But unfortunately, we can't do that because we're not even being placed in these teams in the first place. And we're just not getting representation there in the first place. And I think that's a problem within itself. You can't even do the design work if you're not there, right? And secondly, I don't think you should, be like, hey, everyone listen to me because I'm a girl. Like it shouldn't be like that at all. You should just be able to talk and people are listening to you. That's the ultimate goal here. And I don't want you to go out there now and start saying like, hey, I want everyone should listen to me because I'm a girly. That should not be how you preface it. It should just, in those moments where potentially, like, for example, when I'm working with my male teams and we're talking about designing a product and how it's going to affect the home and the family, and they think about, for some reason they always talk about like the ways that the father could use this product, and they relate it to themselves, of course, but then I have to be the only woman. I don't even have kids, so I don't even know if I'm like qualified to talk about this, but I do come from a place where I do understand the type of empathy that women do carry probably towards their family. And I just say, like, I've noticed that you talked about all the ways that a father could use this product, or yeah, a father could use this product, but have you thought about, potentially how a mom might have her hands full because she's doing laundry and she's cooking and she's cleaning and she needs this from the product. Um, and, it can't be this way because she's, these are her roles and responsibilities, or this is probably what she's looking for. And they'll be like, huh, I never thought about it that way. So it's like, if you want to um, bring perspective, make sure you do it constructively and usefully. It should never be selfishly to serve you. It should be, in a way that, like, if that perspective offers use for the work that you're doing, then yeah, you should talk about it. But I hope that one day, like, we'll just kind of all be attuned to it. We'll have enough people at the table to talk about different types of use cases that it won't even have to be an issue, and we don't even have to talk about this.
Yeah. Now, just because you're a woman or even a male and you're a minority, that doesn't mean that you go back and you expect people to hire you because you are, a minority, right?
I know, I don't think, and I'm sure everyone has different opinions about this, but I don't think we should act like that or play that up. It should be very much like, this should be normal. I shouldn't have to say like this is special at all. But in those instances where you see adversity, or kind of a disconnect, or something's wrong, like you're not feeling supported because of your, like, being a minority or a woman or whatever it is, that's when you should speak up and you should say, hey, I've been noticing this because of X, like, I'm Asian or I'm a woman, like, I can't help but notice, like, I've been experiencing these things. Is it because of this? Just like have a conversation about it.
Yeah, and that comment was from Nick's question: should one hire a less skilled designer with a more diverse background?
Mhm. Interesting. I've had this conversation before, and this is so tricky. This is so tricky. I think it's all circumstantial, right? A lot of times, and this could be, it doesn't even have to be based off of like race or gender or anything like that. Sometimes you find students from a different school. And by the way, like diversity doesn't just have to mean like skin color or gender. It can just simply be from a different region of the US or like a different country. They can still be white and male, and you can hire a European and it'll be completely different than a white male who's from America that's designing, so things like that. But there are instances where like, I'll look at a pool of schools and I have the option to hire another art center industrial designer, and just have like a colony of art center designers. Or you can also look at different schools like CCS or Arizona State, or like, places where they have smaller ID programs, and find people that might not have like the best portfolio you've ever seen that's like the same as, someone from art center, but also has some sort of different way of thinking. You can tell that in their process and what they're doing and what they're showing. And it's like refreshing because it's not like another fan that's designed in a pastel color that's minimal. It's like, sure, they might have like the most beautiful rendering from art center and it's like super minimal and they get it, but they don't have that kind of interesting intellect or thinking or process that this other person from a different school could bring. So it's so hard to, once you start hiring people, to like really compare apples to apples and be like, okay, this person is clearly better than this other person, because everyone brings something different. So it depends on what your company is looking for. And if you have the wiggle room to hire someone that you could grow as a designer, to teach them, because sometimes, your job is not to just hire someone that's good off the bat. It is to actually mentor people and grow them in the company. So a lot of times when we're hiring younger designers, like I do want to look for people that I can grow and mentor, if even their skill sets are not there yet, of someone that's from a prestigious art school, but I see potential in them. I think those are ways that you can look at it. But I get it. Sometimes your team is strapped and you're like, we just need a really good designer. And if they happen to be white and male and you have to go for it, then I get it. You have to go for it. But that also brings me to a topic where it's unfortunate that that even has to be the case in the first place, that like only good designers are white men. That already, like, let's look at where that must come from. It must come from, and this is not always the case, I get it, but a lot of times it's these people that come from very privileged backgrounds that can afford art school, that can afford art tutoring, that can afford going to art center or somewhere amazing and thrive in that environment, and not only get there, but then like have these men professors or whatever professors like push them along the way and like be able to like bounce off ideas and like have a relationship with that other people don't get. So like that's why in the end, in the pool of design applications you're getting, you see like, oh my god, like, yeah, I have really good designers, but they're all white men. Like, how am I supposed to get diverse representation? Well, this doesn't just happen there. We have to solve the problem from, the seed. And I think we just have to get better about, and I don't know how, right? Because I'm just a designer. Like, I can't just like start a program and go to like rural areas and go teach design to like young kids, but those are probably the kinds of things we have to do as designers, and just, talk to like little girls about design, or like make it more mainstream. And like, I don't know, I hope like Carly Kloss or like Taylor Swift, I don't know, like I hope they like become aware of industrial design. Or like, actually Carly Kloss is a great example. She was like a model and she's mainstream, and she was able to voice about her love for coding, and she made this awesome like coding for girls camp and all that, and all of a sudden coding became mainstream amongst women. It's just things like that. Like, I hope moving forward, like, we're able to bring that kind of awareness of the industry just in general to the world, and we'll see more of that, and it'll just be like this domino effect, because it's not just at the company when we're hiring good designers versus bad designers. It's just so much more complex than that.
Yeah, I think it does start, like you said, from the seed, from when you're in grade school. Like, I think outreach is very important. I think there's a lot of investment in our undergraduate, upbringing, but I think it goes way back to even when you're like in junior high or in high school. A lot of this isn't taught. industrial design is already small, so it's unheard of in those environments. I think it's our job as designers to go back to our schools and really make it accessible, make it so that these young kids know what it is, and that their options are not only architecture, lawyer, engineering, whatever they only know of. They know what they know from their parents, so it's, I think, our job and responsibility to really be open about all this.
Yeah. It really comes down to the education system. I'm just so disappointed. Like, this goes with everything that's happening right now in the US with like defunding the police, and hopefully they like take those funds and put it back into education because we freaking need it, obviously. And like I just wish there were more programs around the art department, even in like middle school and high school. And it's not just you go to art class and like paint a picture, like there are different things you can do with art. And a lot of times kids are good at art, but they don't know how to apply it to a career. And I just wish that like schools would teach classes on like how to like sketch a product, or like how to research around design. Like these are things that kids can do. And I wish that there were more ways that schools can teach kids about applying the arts into something that's career oriented. And then also just like in colleges, I wish that they would offer more scholarships. Art schools would just offer, they have so much money. I don't even know where it goes. This is commonly a topic. I wish they would offer more scholarships to like Black communities who have tons of talented, again, like artistic kids, but they don't know how to apply it to a career. And they just become artists and they can't make money. And it's just this effect. And it just comes down to a lack of awareness and a lack of the education system doing anything about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of that money doesn't go to the educators, because I know that I wasn't. A lot of educators don't get paid very well, so it's not motivating to go to a class and put in the extra time to teach
Right.
some of these things because of the resources that are not available. Um, yeah, let's start a cult. Let's start a movement. um, I think it definitely starts with education for sure, and I think if you look at the curriculum that is taught in design education right now, it hasn't changed. I don't think it's ever changed. It's the same blueprint that was you know um, that's been around since post World War II, right? You have to take this class, you have to take this class, you have to learn how to sketch, you have to learn how to prototype, how to CAD, and you know, the curriculum has never really mirrored industry, or has never mirrored culture, or what's trending in our, in our world, right? So right now, what's trending is, it's always been trending, is um, culture, and a lot of other things that are happening with what you mentioned, with these movements that are happening, and I think design needs to really mirror that. So when you teach design history, right? Um, Try to bring in other designers from other parts of the world, as opposed to, like you said, when you Google industrial designers, you get 10 white male, and we all know who they are. We
Right.
we know them. Like, I can, I think I can recite you the top 15 industrial designers in history more than I can, tell you, my social security number. I don't think I even remember that. But it's all because it's, like, that's what they teach you, and they ingrain that in you, and then, me as an educator, I pass that on to my students, and it's this cycle, right? It's not nothing changes unless you do something about it. So, what is one message, before we wrap all this up? One message that you want to leave the audience with? Everyone is kind of in the state of being a little impatient with being indoors, and not being able to go outside, and in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of this kind of movement that's happening in this country. What is something that someone can do to be active, to do something about what's going on?
Mm. I would say kind of my last two slides are perfect there. I think let's be vocal. Let's use our platforms to show our work. Let's vocalize the issues, the things that are clear. Let's show our process, and if you're a girl and you have to talk about this is what it's like to be a girl designer just to like get more girls excited about design, like let's do that too. I think this is just a time to like collectively all be aware about it, do something about it, whether it's like something small like posting about a female industrial designer you learned about on Instagram, or talking to your second cousin who's a girl and she's really good at art and doesn't know what to do with it, or if you're a designer, a student doing a really cool product that has been over hyper masculinely designed and redesigning it the way that you think it should be designed and putting it out there, getting it on Render Weekly. If we all do something small, and we constantly do these things collectively, massive numbers, right? We'll see some small amount of change in the industry. We'll start seeing, new applicants. We'll start seeing pools of applications that have really good work. And it's not just a white male. It's, it can be someone of color. It can be a female. Like, hopefully that's what we start seeing. That's what we want to start seeing, right? So, yeah, let's do this together.
Fantastic. I would love for everyone to take a picture of, a very masculine product and overlay it, and then just like, give it your own aesthetic. I bet you if there's enough, if there's enough visuals out there, companies will pay attention. Because the one thing that designers really hate is someone taking their own work and then getting it like redesigned by, um, people that wasn't meant for them, or people that, like for example, the PlayStation 5. Every designer that I've seen online say, I love this design, the majority of those designers are not going to buy it. And every designer that I've seen like, doesn't look that great, those are the designers that are most likely going to buy it. And I'm like scratching my head like, that's great that you love it, but I know you're not going to buy it. And it's really interesting, like, I think Spencer Nugent did a YouTube video where he resketched it, right? And I don't know, it'd be great if someone from Sony saw that and they were like actually like paid attention to the community, right? Like I wonder if these companies have community outreach, or people are checking in to the actual like, users who are going to buy this, or they're just doing shit to be different or to disrupt or whatever the case may be. Yeah, that'd be really
Yeah.
awesome. Take something and overlay it, and then get vocal, like you said. So, Jessica, thank you so much for your time. This lunch session, is being recorded. We'll post it up on our webpage for those who missed it and for those who want to reference it. Really appreciate
Also,
your.
I feel bad for all the questions I didn't get to answer. There's a lot of really good ones I see. If you want to like email me, if you want to Instagram message me, I'm sure the post has, all that information on there. Just feel free to give me a holler and I'll try to get to all of you guys.
Absolutely. There's a ton of questions, and I really appreciate your patience, everyone. But the cool thing about these lens sessions is we have an after lens. So after this session, we're going to have another Zoom where everyone gets to come forward and show their face and, be vocal. And if you missed your question here, you can ask it there for sure. But Jessica, thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and have a wonderful Sunday.
Goodbye.